Learning to ride a motorbike is amazing, but no one tells you about the little things that make a big difference. Here are tips I've picked up myself and even passed on to friends that will make your life way easier and safer. I've been riding for over a month now, and in that time I've made mistakes, learned a lot, and also helped a friend on starting their own riding journey too. In this video, I'm going to be talking about lots of tips that I've picked up in my journey of riding a motorbike. In my previous video, I spoke specifically about the bike I bought, which is a Honda CB125F. But in this video, I'm going to be giving generalized information for anyone who's looking at getting into motorbike riding. Firstly, I want to talk about safety and security. In order to keep yourself safe and your bike safe, you're going to need the right equipment and the right mindset. In order to keep yourself safe, make sure you've got the right level of gear on. A helmet is all that's needed in the UK. But make sure you've got yourself a good pair of gloves, a good jacket, some riding trousers and some boots. Now, from my experience, I purchased my helmet and a pair of gloves before I did my CBT. After my CBT, I purchased a jacket and some trousers, and I utilised some walking or hiking boots which I bought in the past. A pair of motorcycle boots would be better, but for now it's got me going. For your helmet, make sure your helmet fits you. If you've got any questions about whether or not it fits you, always make sure you go into a store, try it on, and ask some of the staff there to see if it's sized correctly. For your gloves, I would advise you to try and pick up something which is suitable for use with touchscreen devices. I picked up a pair of leather/textile gloves which are really nice and they fit really well, and I do like the material on it. However, it can be very, very frustrating at times when I'm trying to set my navigation on my phone, or I'm trying to dismiss a notification which may be in the way. With my jacket, I ended up opting for a summer jacket. They had two options, textile or leather. However, leather can get quite expensive very quick, so I opted for the textiles. And in this case, I picked a summer jacket which was meshed, because I found that it's easier to layer up and block the wind using a windbreaker if you need to stay warm than it is to cool yourself down with a jacket that isn't meshed. This is entirely your option, but this is just based off my own experience. The mesh jacket can get quite cold in months that are not in the spring or summer. Also, it's not waterproof. For my jeans or my trousers, I went for the jeans which were padded, had knee protection and a hip protection. Again, when buying gear, check the safety rating online. One tip I like to use was going onto the bike store's website and then filtering out for the different levels of safety rating, whether it be AAA, AA or single A. Again, ask a member of staff in store for their recommendations to see if you can find something with a higher safety rating at a lower price, and if it's something that suits you, then you've made a win. For my boots, as I said, I'm using my hiking boots as they are quite sturdy and they give me a solid ankle protection. However, there are dedicated boots out there which are even safer and are made from materials which are more abrasion resistant, and also I tend to find that most of them don't have laces, because if a lace becomes undone, it can be a risk if it goes into your chain. However, I've not had any issues with my walking boots and they've been quite comfortable so far. When considering your gear, make sure you pick up gear that you know you're going to be willing to wear. Don't buy something that it's too inconvenient for you, because having no gear is more dangerous than having some gear. Ensure that the gear fits you, ensure that the armor stays in place. Try it on, give it a go. With the pants, you can also utilize some of the fitting equipment like the motorbike structure which will be in the motorbike store, so you can sit on it and see how the jeans feel when you're actually sat in the riding position. The next thing I want to talk about is the mindset of staying safe. What things can we do to minimize the risk of being involved in an incident or an accident? People always come to me and tell me that, riding a motorbike is more dangerous than being in a car. Statistically, it is true. However, there are things we can do to minimize our risk and reduce the risk. When looking at the statistics, we'll find that accidents occur for multiple and various reasons. These can include things like riding in unfavorable weather conditions, riding when under the influence of drugs or alcohols, or in some cases, it's not the rider's fault at all and someone else has caused the incident. But again, there are things in our power that we can do to ensure that we increase our time between thinking about an incident occurring and it occurring. Here are some of the tips I have and rules that I follow for myself. Again, these may vary for you depending on why you have a motorbike. For those of you who ride a motorbike as a necessity to get to work and back, some of these are unavoidable. However, for myself, where I only ride for leisurely purposes, these are rules that I follow quite strictly in order to reduce the chances of me being involved in an incident. Number 1, don't ride in the dark if you don't need to. Riding in the dark can make it very difficult for you to be seen, even when you've got gear and even when you've got lights. People can't see you in broad daylight sometimes, never mind seeing you in the dark. Don't ride in the rain. The rain can make the chances of sliding or skidding on your bike increased, and as a result you could be in an accident or an incident. If it's raining and you don't need to be out, avoid it for the day. I know in the UK it's not ideal because it rains quite a lot, but there are some lovely sunny days out there where we can go and enjoy our motorbikes and also stay nice and dry. Riding in the rain is not always the most enjoyable experience. Number 3, make sure you've got the right gear. As I mentioned, having the right gear will keep you safer on the road if something does happen. And as people always say, don't dress for the ride, dress for the slide. Don't drive under the influence of any drugs or alcohol. If you drink, make sure you've not had any alcohol in the time prior to riding your motorbike. If you take any recreational drugs, again, you should keep your mind as sober as possible so you can stay as alert and aware as possible. But if you are aware that you have taken something, maybe give the bike a skip. Also, consider any prescription medication or over-the-counter medication you may be on. Some of these may cause you to be drowsy or affect your attention or alertness. You may want to refer to your doctor or a healthcare professional about any prescription medication you're taking. Another factor is anger. Now, anger in of itself is not like a drug or alcohol, but it can also cloud your mind and your decision making. If you're angry, don't get on your bike. Don't make a stupid decision for a moment's weakness of being angry. It's normal to be angry and it's normal to have strong emotions in life. There are multiple things going on in our individual lives. However, if you find yourself to be angry, maybe skip getting on your bike. Try not to take your anger out on the bike either. Give yourself a moment, go rest, go sit down, go have a lay down. Allow yourself to come back to a calm state of mind before you get on your bike. Don't ride if you're going to be in a rush. I've found that when I'm riding leisurely, I am safer, I am calmer when I know that I don't have to be anywhere specific. I won't filter when I think it's unsafe, and I also take the time to just enjoy the ride and enjoy the environment and the scenic views that I'm in. When riding in a rush or knowing that you have to be somewhere in a specific amount of time, it will affect your decision making and put you into riskier situations. Don't speed. The speed limit is in place for a reason, and I know it's very easy to want to get carried away on your motorbike with the power that you've got behind the throttle. However, when speeding, it can reduce the time we have to think and make decisions and act on them. If you're doing above the speed limit, Other cars will not be anticipating or be ready for the speeds you're doing, and this can result in an accident or an incident. So just be careful and take your time and enjoy the ride. You can still enjoy the power in your bike on appropriate roads. These are just some of the rules that I've given myself in order to ensure that I can reduce the risk of an incident or collision. However, as I mentioned, it may be down to someone else's actions, and other people can cause incidents too, which are out of our control. However, we can minimize this by ensuring that we stay alert. Always do your observations in your mirrors, look around, know what vehicles are around you, know what junctions are around you. Have you got a good enough gap between yourself and the vehicle in front if it were to suddenly brake? Taking all of these things into account, we can try and stay observant and be prepared for any incidents that may occur. One tip is to ensure that you stay in gear even when you are at a stop. It's well worth securing your vehicle using either the front brake or the rear brake, but just try and stay in gear so that in case you need to move quickly out of the way from a hazard that may be coming towards you, you're ready to go. Don't sit like a sitting duck waiting to be hit by another vehicle. Your vision is also very important. I found that when I got into my helmet, I had to deal with the visor fogging up. And one thing you can do is purchase something called a pin lock insert for your helmet, which is a sort of absorbent plastic which absorbs the water from your breath, ensuring that the visor doesn't steam up. This naturally dries over time when left and can be easily cleaned. If you don't have a pin lock visor, consider opening up a small gap in your visor as you're riding, which will allow the airflow into the helmet, which will help remove some of the fog or the steam. So now I want to talk about bike safety. How can we keep your bike safe? So we need to ensure that it's maintained and kept up to standard according to the manufacturer's recommendations. Utilize the owner's manual. You can always find these online to see how often your bike should be serviced, and always ensure you're using the right fluids. For my bike, I've been using WD-40 and considered kerosene to clean the chain, and for lubrication I've used some heavy gear oil. Again, you can find more specific recommendations online and through some research. If you've got any questions, drop them in the comments below. To keep it safe from prying eyes, utilize a cover if you're going to leave your bike outside. Utilize an alarm if you can. I've got an alarm which triggers and also acts as a disc lock, and if the bike is moved, the alarm goes off. Also consider a heavy duty chain, one that's thick enough and is going to reduce the chances of your bike being stolen. One thing to consider is the chain's length. I ended up opting for the shortest length that was available for a specific chain, and I found that it's quite difficult to get around the wheel in some situations. So looking back, I would probably have gone and opted for a slightly longer chain. Just do remember that if someone has their eyes on your bike and they really want to steal it, they're going to find a way to do it. Chains can be cut, disc locks can be cut, steering locks can be broken. But what it will do is it will deter people from even giving it a go. When they see that there are thick chains present and disc locks present, they're going to think twice about attacking your bike. And if there's other bikes in the region, they may go for something that's easier. If you've bought your security equipment, make sure you use it. Don't become complacent and lazy and forget to put it on, or just think that nobody's going to nick it. Because if it does go, then you'll be banging your head on the wall saying, I should have put it on. Another way to keep your bike safe is knowing how your motorbike handles, and this is what I'm going to be talking about in the next part of this video. So some of the tips I want to talk about are slow speed maneuvers, turning the vehicle and leaning the vehicle, and also figuring out how to be in the right gear which is most appropriate for the road which you're on. This part of the video has been inspired by some of the tips that I provided to a friend after he bought a motorbike a few days ago. When we were out on some of the national speed limit roads, I found that he was lingering behind and finding it difficult to speed up, especially on a 125cc. I sort of figured out that he was staying far behind because he wasn't getting enough power out of his engine on demand, and this was because he was in the wrong gears. When I asked him when he was shifting the gears, was he shifting the same way he did when he rides his car, and he said yes. We often find ourselves always going into higher gears into our cars to stay more economical. However, I explained that on a bike it's important to ensure that there's always adequate power available when needed in order to ensure that the bike stays as stable as possible and that there's always power to move out in case there's a hazard. He purchased the CB125F as well, which does not have a rev meter, so it's very hard to tell at what point of the rev range you're in. However, I said to him, you should listen to your motorbike's engine. Get a feel of whereabouts in the rev range you are, if you're in the lower end or if you're on the higher end. And one way to test for this is to actually get it up to the limiter on some of these bikes. Again, refer to your own bike's manual if needed, or check if there's a limiter in place. This allowed him to then be more aware of where he was in the rev range, and also allowed him to extract as much power as he could from each gear. And when he was going around the bends at some higher speeds, it also ensured he had enough power to get him round the corner in a much smoother way. Japanese engines are really good for this because you often hear revs bounce from the top of the rev range, so you know that you're ready to shift. So once you get familiar with this, you'll shift just a little bit earlier before hitting the point where it bounces. The next thing I noticed was, as he was picking up his speed, when approaching corners, he was slowing down quite a lot whilst I leaned into the corner. Now, what I had realized was that he was not comfortable or confident in maneuvering the bike around the corners. So I briefly demonstrated how counter steering works and how he can also utilize his thighs and his knees to shift the weight on the bike. You can see in some of the video that's rolling now how pushing against the handlebar turns the vehicle in a specific direction. So pushing the handlebar on your right hand side away from you turns the bike to the right, and pushing the handlebar on the left hand side away from you pushes the bike to the left. This is quite counterintuitive, however this is why it's called counter steering. I'll also show here an example of where I'm not utilizing the handlebar to turn the vehicle, but all I'm doing is bringing my knees and my thighs up on one side, which then shifts the bike to a side. So when bringing my left knee up and my thigh over the bike moves to the right, and vice versa with the other side. This can often feel like a much more stable way of turning for those who are beginning. A good tip is for those who are not familiar with the maneuverability of a bike, practice moving side to side whilst traveling on a straight line. Very small movements will help you understand how the bike maneuvers when you're sat on it going at a certain speed, and how the counter steering comes into play. Keep giving it a bit of practice in car parks and straight roads where there's no other cars around, and hopefully then once you're a bit more confident you can apply it onto corners. Get onto some of the higher speed corners and just practice as you bring your speed up how the bike handles and maneuvers. And the last point I want to cover on this is slow speed maneuvers. I mentioned in the previous video that initially I found slow speed maneuvers quite difficult because I just didn't know what I was doing. What you need to understand is that a motorbike, when it doesn't have any power, wants to fall to the side. However, once the engine becomes engaged and there's some power given to the engine and the drive, then the bike will naturally keep itself up. You'll often see videos of motorbikes and bicycles that are able to roll away on their own and stay upright with no rider on them. That's because when there is a force being applied and driving the bike will naturally keep upright. So when completing slow speed maneuvers, If you often feel like you're falling to the side or you're having to put your foot down, it's because there's not enough power being delivered to the wheels to keep it upright. Now, power does not necessarily mean speed. More power doesn't always mean more speed. So when you're doing slow maneuvers, what you want to do is you want to be at the biting point, utilizing your gear lever. You want to be giving the bike a little bit of accelerator or gas. This provides power to the wheels. However, because we want to stay nice and slow, we're going to utilize the rear brake to slow us down and speed us up. So what you want to practice is getting to the biting point, getting a significant amount of gas onto whilst you're sat at the biting point, but keeping both your hands exactly in place and only using your right foot or the rear brake to maintain your speed as you go faster and slower. Practice this in a straight line. See how the bike wants to keep itself up. It's very useful for when you're coming to a stop behind a vehicle and you know the lights are about to change, so you don't want to put your feet down, so you just hold the bike at a slow speed. And again, it's also very useful for when we're turning. Now, for any of you who have done a simple physics class, you know that when we turn a vehicle, an acceleration or a force is required, even if we're staying at the same speed. Even if we're going around the corner at the same speed, there needs to be an acceleration into the corner to help us drive around the corner. So again, it's another situation where we need to make sure that there's enough gas being given to the bike whilst we're doing the corner. So for slow speed maneuvers, treat it like a small, slow corner. We need to be at the biting point, we need to be giving acceleration, and we need to be utilizing the rear brake to speed us up or slow us down. But the difference in this situation is we want to be looking at where we want to go. When we look at where we want to go, naturally our heads turn, our shoulders tilt, and our arms move. This then directs the bike to where you want to be. If you start looking down, you're going to make the bike unstable. If you start looking the wrong way, your arms are going to pivot the wrong way and the bike is going to go the wrong way. So practice looking into the direction of where you want to go. Don't keep looking back and forth. Just do your observations, make sure it's clear, and fix your head into position for where you want to be. Then apply the same maneuvers for the slow driving, utilizing the clutch, the acceleration, and the rear brake. When we're doing slow turns, we don't want to be touching our front brake. If we press the front brake whilst the wheels are turned, it can cause the bike to become unstable and fall over. I hope these driving tips have really helped and it's something you can take on board. Practice yourself, go out there and practice, because that's the only way you're going to really understand and learn how to maneuver your bike. Riding is a skill you're always improving. Stay humble, stay sharp, and keep learning from others and your own mistakes. What's one tip you wish you knew earlier? If you're a learner, what's been the hardest part so far? And if you've been riding for a while, what advice would you give to a new biker? Drop your tips below if you found this helpful, and subscribe for more learner-friendly content. I really appreciate your comments below, and I want to show a lot of thanks for all the love and engagement that I had in my previous video. Thank you very much, everyone.